And action. Marilyn had a question about no pain, no gain. And we're going to talk about that statement. Usually you'll hear it thrown around in gyms by personal trainers, exercise physiologists, yoga teachers, instructors, life coaches, even in physical therapy in some cases. So it can be either considered what to expect after an exercise endeavor if you're an athlete or trying to be an athlete, or what to expect if you have a disease process like chronic fatigue, stroke, fibromyalgia, rheumatoid arthritis, when the physical therapist is trying to move that body part that's so sore and stiff. So bottom line is you can have pain from muscle that is being moved. So let's talk about the concept, and maybe if you understand it, you'll know how to possibly avoid it. Back when I was in my teens, this is when I took the title of Mr. Natural New Jersey Teenage Division, and then I took Mr. Novice East Coast Teenage Division, 1982. And I had abs back then. I wish I had these now, but I got ripped back then because I simply didn't have any money to buy food. I lived in an apartment with 2 bouncers and a bartender, and the biggest commodity we had was alcohol. So by default, I got ripped. I was able to tolerate or get enough food and nutrition in to fuel my workouts without crashing, but I was also able to tolerate the pain afterward. So how do we, let's talk about the concept again. I guess in a nutshell, if you have a muscle is supposed to move joint. So this bicep is supposed to, against resistance, supposed to contract. You can see that if you contract muscle, if you continue to do this, grows because I'm forcing my muscle against my palm up here. And if I continue to do that, I'll shake, I'll get fatigued, and lactic acid will build up in this muscle group because it's going past the point of ATP. It exhausts ATP, adenosine triphosphate, which is the energy packet that mitochondria make to turn the muscle fibers on. So that's kind of cool. Muscle fibers work like this. They're flat when they first start up, but when ATP is around and calcium is around, they go like this. They form cross bridges and they pull. They pull each other, they shorten, and they get fat. That's why it gets fat. So the problem is if ATP runs out, then you become tremorous and you build up lactic acid. Pain starts to set in and you become weak because it only can go so far. If your endurance is high and your fitness level is excellent and you don't take any alcohol, drugs, and you sleep properly, you'll be able to hold this for a long amount of time and tolerate a ton of lactic acid. And that is how exercise works. We do exercise to perform better at what we do, endurance-wise and strength-wise. So if you're a marathoner, you keep on pushing the envelope with training, get better and better every time, and you bring down your times. If you're a powerlifter, you try to correct your technique, your form, and you continue to lift massive weights, heal up, lift more weights so that you can win the competition. Other things also happen too. If you're a crossbow or if you shoot bow and arrow, if you hunt, you want to be able to hold and keep the steady technique going with accuracy. So it works in all kinds of sports, whether it's accuracy sports, whether it's combat sports, whether it's team sports, individual sports. It always is to push muscle, strain it, control it, develop endurance, and build it up, and then recover. So that, and then again, that's a downside because as these cross fibers of actin and myosin contract like this, if they're pushed past the limit, the acid environment will cause tissue breakdown. The torn muscles, that microscopic tears to the muscles or tendons, will cause tissue repair. And during that repair, which hopefully is not too damaging, I mean, if you cut your muscle, it'll take up to a month to 3 months for the muscle ends to come together. If you just break muscle fibers and strain tendons, it'll probably take a month, maybe 3 or 4 weeks, just like the typical ankle sprain. Ankle sprain is a forced tear of ligament and fiber, ligament and usually tendon, but when you have an ankle sprain and it's not severe, it takes about 2 to 4 weeks. So same thing with controlled induction of damage. Now, if you can kind of minimize that, put enough force and damage or stress to muscle so that it grows but repairs within 24 to 48 hours, that would be ideal. And that's how exercise works. Whether it's for skeletal muscle, whether it's for cardiac muscle, you can't really do it for smooth muscle of the bowels, but that's another discussion. So the concept of pain, or the delayed onset muscle soreness that occurs after the endeavor of force is applied, that varies with everybody. If your level of fitness is terrible, you're a couch potato, you don't exercise, then you're going to have a longer healing time. If you smoke, if you have diabetes, if you have chronic inflammation of some sort, you're going to have a really long healing time. So you have to expect that if you're going to have a long healing time, don't do so much damage so that you can kind of make it concise. Do a little bit at a time. And that's why it's so valuable to have a coach keep eyes on. Even my athletes, even if you think you're good, it's always better to have a second set of eyes watch over. If you're accountable to somebody else, then you as an athlete won't push too hard. Sometimes that athletic brain will be too aggressive. In fact, I had a volleyball player here today, and I said the biggest problem with coming back, she's coming back from a paralysis or an infection. The biggest problem with coming back from an infection with an athlete is they will overuse. So they'll over-push, and they're used to pushing hard, but when you're out of sorts or inflamed, the problem will be that you push and then you crash and you start all over again deep into your disease process. So that's what athletes kind of learn. We learn to take advantage of a short amount of time, reproduce the stress to the muscle so that it grows, but also truncate the amount of time it takes to heal up. People who are sick, sometimes if they have that idea about what to do, they'll say, oh, I can do this, and I'm sure that adrenaline burst and the idea that they used to do how they used to do their sport in their head, if they haven't run for a while, oh, I can do a mile, and you get going, and then you feel it the next week. So we don't want the brain's athlete to take over. We want a common ground with the outside opinion on when to stop. And it might seem like it's very tedious, but again, if you go in baby steps and you just test the waters a little bit and you prove that, okay, it wasn't that big of a workout and I didn't get sore for past 24 to 48 hours, I'll hit it harder next time. And you keep on hitting it harder from that point on, versus taking an exercise routine that you did like 3 years ago, or a sport form or technique you did 3 years ago, and just applying it out of nowhere. You're going to get hurt. Now, if you're young and flexible, you'll probably be able to do that. I did my first 2 marathons thinking, I'm a yoga instructor, I'm going to give it a try. Who cares about running? And I was able to make it through the marathon without training, but I hit the wall both times at 13 miles, and I had to walk the rest of the way. So I won't do that again. I don't like marathons. I think there's other things to do, like climbing mountains. But for any reason, so it's always important to understand the concept of no pain, no gain, delayed onset muscle soreness. It's also important to know how to decrease the chances of it and speed up its resolution. So in addition to knowing how to just temper your introduction to activity and push the envelope, 1 rep maximum lift also is important to learn how to do, but you really have to be spotted or coached on that one. So if you're an athlete, fine. If you're not an athlete, get a coach to do it for you. If you've already stepped into that realm and you have an injury, well, the things that you can do to decrease the healing time or truncate your healing time, push fluids. Important to always stay hydrated, especially up until dinner, especially during your exercise routine. Number 2, avoid any crappy foods during the refeed or refuel phase. A lot of us will feel after an exercise routine, we deserve to go have a beer or stop by McDonald's because you're craving something. Well, don't do that. During the refeed phase of the fasting mimicking diet is when people really take advantage of how the good food is supposed to treat those white blood cells that got turned over or scraped out. So same thing when you're in training. If you train hard, then the time period right after the training is very important to eat clean. You give your body the building blocks it needs, and those tendons that were strained or the muscle that was strained will be able to build up and repair fast. Avoiding alcohol, just as important. Avoiding tobacco, just as important. 2 days after your max lift or your endeavor, your exercise routine, I would try to maximize on your sleep time. I know most people say that they can get by with 5 to 6 hours, but if you're somebody in training, you really have to try to push the envelope with that. Because the longer you sleep, the more the muscle has to rest. Granted, the night or the morning after your tough endeavor, when you wake up, you're going to be stiff as hell. Well, that's part of the healing process. So if you understand no pain, no gain, if you understand delayed onset muscle soreness, if you understand how to stretch the morning that you wake up after the exercise routine, and not to just step down and go straight to the bathroom, you got to learn to take things gingerly, stretch out, give the muscle what it needs to get started again, do no further harm, and it'll treat you right by reverting back to normal and being stronger than the first time you tried it.